So, in the wake of Chapter 12 of Two Blue Vortex, I've been thinking about a lot of things. I've been curious about things like, how does Kashin Koji know about the Soul Thorn? How is he so knowledgeable about the anatomy of the Shinju? I've been curious about how Boruto is now able to use things like Breakthrough. Does it mean he's been training with Orochimaru? I've asked questions about how there's a separate divine tree that seems to be able to heal Hidari and the rest of the Shinju from their injuries. And here's the thing, while we were technically given a ton of questions in Chapter 12 of Two Blue Vortex, we were also given some answers. Mostly answers that revolved around how Rasengan Uzuhiko worked. But there's some problems with the answers we were given as they pertain to Rasengan Uzuhiko. And those problems were that, for the life of me, I just don't trust the answers we were given. See, because while technically more exposition was given to us, the reader, about how Rasengan Uzuhiko works by Boruto, the exposition that was given to us basically just explained how Boruto was able to use Rasengan Uzuhiko, but not how he learned it, or why it's an ability in the first place. Like, yeah, I get that he channels the energy of the earth in through his 2 feet, and therefore he needs to keep his 2 feet on the ground, but that doesn't answer the question of why is he able to access the rotational power of the world? And why did he refer to the possible power that's accessible through Rasengan Uzuhiko as limitless? Because, well, yes, of course, the rotational power of a planet is a ton of power. It is almost certainly not limitless. Now, I guess in the grand scheme of powers from the Naruto and Boruto universe, it would be close to limitless. But when there's literally a power out there being wielded by Ada and people like Shibai called omnipotence, which is just the word for all-powerful, harnessing the power of a rotating planet doesn't exactly seem like limitless power. And thus, even though Chapter 12 did give us more information on Rasengan Uzuhiko, I'm honestly left with more questions than I had previously. But the biggest question that I'm left with is, where did it come from? See, because now that we understand how Rasengan Uzuhiko works a little bit better, and we understand that Boruto has to channel the energy of the planet in through his feet to funnel out in a giant tornado of Rasengan, that makes the idea of him learning it from any of the people we currently know even the more confusing, because nobody else has any ability that's even close to that. Now, obviously, what Boruto's been up to for the last 3 years is as big a mystery as basically anything else in Two Blue Vortex, but that mystery's only become larger on account of the fact that we now understand how Rasengan Uzuhiko works. And thus today, I want to try and answer that question. I want to bring an answer to the question of how and why Boruto learned Rasengan Uzuhiko, and maybe more importantly, who taught it to him. And somewhat ironically, I have 3 possible answers to this question, one of which was provided by the manga, one of which was provided by a fan, and one of which is my own. Unfortunately, while these answers do vary in interest, they do fall in a pretty linear scope of believability and likelihood to actually have happened. And thus today I want to present you with 3 possible answers that answer the question of how and why did Boruto learn Rasengan Uzuhiko, all provided by different sources, and allow you to come to the conclusion of which of these sources you believe to be correct. Because today we're talking the origins of Rasengan Uzuhiko explained. But before we get to explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you want to hear me dive into all your other favorite anime and manga, go ahead and follow my other channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto and Boruto, I talk all other anime and manga. Or if you want to see me try to bring real-life challenges to the anime world, go ahead and follow my brand new channel that I created with Stephen He, Chris Barnett, and Danny Mata called Anime IRL. Or if you just want to hear me talk about anime, go ahead and follow my anime podcast, The Talkers Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime and manga this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. I apologize if I sound weird. I'm the weirdest kind of sick I've ever been in my entire life. Like, my nostrils are clear, but I feel gross. But I'm here for you. And unfortunately, all of my coworkers are plastic, so I can't use the excuse of, oh, if I show up for work, I'll get my coworkers sick. But anyways, Chapter 12 of Two Blue Vortex. The Rasengan Uzuhiko finally has its secrets revealed. Right? Well, sort of, I guess. That's kind of like us being able to piece back every piece of JFK's head exactly to figure out where the bullet hit him from, and then been like, well, it came from over there. Because basically all we got when it came to an explanation of how Rasengan Uzuhiko works is that Boruto needs to keep his feet on the ground to channel the power of the rotation of the earth. And thus, so far as we understand it, Rasengan Uzuhiko is basically just Boruto tapping into the centrifugal force of a spinning planet, which is cool. It's understandable and highly digestible. Obviously, any planet that spins on any axis is going to have a massive amount of kinetic energy, and tapping into that kinetic energy would be a massive source of power. See, every human on Earth and every entity on every spinning planet, and all planets are spinning, at least all habitable planets are spinning. So you and I, as I'm filming and you're watching, are spinning thousands of miles an hour right now. And while that may not mean a ton to us, because obviously seems pretty stable here, if the planet were to just stop spinning one day, we would all launch through our nearest wall at at several thousand miles an hour and turn into pink mist. Unless, of course, you weren't inside and you were outside in some field somewhere, in which case you would just launch in a straight line directly off the planet at thousands of miles an hour, and you would die immediately because the force would break every bone in your body.
Oh, Nick, what do you mean? Wouldn't I just be continuing at the same speed?
Yeah, but the planet would still have gravity, so you wouldn't go that far. However, if the planet were to stop spinning, then our kinetic energy would be truly known, but only at our body weights. That is to say that the kinetic energy that this bottle has and that I have, both on a spinning planet, is massively different because our weights are different, which means that the kinetic energy of the globe itself, which weighs trillions of times my weight, is way more massive than my kinetic energy on this spinning planet. And that's essentially what Boruto is telling us, is that if you were to drop an adamantite pole into the earth, something that couldn't be bent or broken, and you were to place a body not spinning at the speed of the globe in front of that adamantite pole, and then have the adamantite pole hit that body with the speed of the planet, that's essentially what Boruto is doing to somebody every single time he uses Rasengan Uzuhiko. He is delivering the force of an entire rotating planet into somebody's chest. And thus the reason that Boruto referred to the possible power of the Rasengan Uzuhiko as limitless is that with a certain amount of time of channeling the Earth's energy, Boruto could hypothetically channel the entire centripetal force of a spinning planet, which is an insane amount of force. After all, the equation to figure out how much kinetic energy something has is 1/2 mass times velocity squared. Now, usually when you're doing kinetic energy calculations to figure out how powerful a character is in anime, the mass that you're calculating with is simply the mass of the character in question. However, if Boruto is able to deliver blows that capitalize on the centrifugal force and kinetic energy of an entire rotating planet, then not only is the power behind his punches the mass of the planet, but also traveling at 1,000 miles per hour, which is like many meters per second. I'm not doing the conversion. And that's without calculating the speed in which he's delivering that punch, because remember, everybody is technically at rest on a spinning planet. So the kinetic energy for a punch from Boruto, technically delivered at 0 miles an hour, we'll call it a number infinitesimally close to 0 miles an hour, would still be 1/2 times the mass of the planet times 1,000 miles per hour squared. And if I'm doing my calculations right, which there's a fair possibility that I'm not, it's been a while since I took physics, that would mean that the kinetic energy of the planet is 5.966 times 10 to the 29th joules. Now, while that's an insanely large number, it doesn't mean anything to the average person, so let me conceptualize it for you. The largest nuclear bomb ever tested, the Tsar Bomba, had a yield of roughly 55 megatons. And while megatons refer to the amount of DNA that would need to be exploded in order to replicate that kind of explosion, but in kinetic energy terms, it clocked in around 220 petajoules. Now, a petajoule is 1 times 10 to the 15th joules. And we're saying that the kinetic energy of a spinning globe, specifically our spinning globe, we don't know if the Naruto globe is larger or not, is roughly 6 times 10 to the 29th joules. Now, for those of you who have been out of math for a while, you'll think, oh, so just about double the largest nuclear bomb ever exploded. No. That's not how it works. Yes, one is 200 times 10 to the 15th joules, and the other is roughly 6 times 10 to the 30th joules. But if you were to double the explosive yield of the Tsar Bomba, you wouldn't get 10 times 30 joules, you would get 450-ish times 10 to the 15th joules. Even though technically it would be times 10 to the 17th because 220 is 2 spots bigger than 1 petajoule. So in actuality, the Tsar Bomba explosion could either be written as 220 times 10 to the 15th or 2.2 times 10 to the 17th. So how many of the world's biggest nuclear explosions would we need to equal the kinetic energy of a spinning planet? Oh, you know, 2.7 times 10 to the 12th. Or 2.7 trillion Tsar Bombas, which is it's a lot of power, and that's assuming that the Naruto globe isn't bigger than ours or spinning faster than ours. Two things that we genuinely cannot know. And thus the idea of Boruto referring to the level of power accessible to him through the medium of tapping into this kinetic energy as limitless isn't all that crazy, even though it is technically inaccurate. Because I tell you right now, if Boruto is given enough time to channel the entirety of this kinetic energy, he is very easily into the conversation of Planet Buster, and even possibly Solar Buster, which very easily makes this the strongest jutsu we've ever seen in the Naruto and Boruto universes, with the possible exception of omnipotence. And thus Boruto absolutely eviscerating Hidari with only a couple of seconds to draw on the Earth's energy makes a fair amount of sense. But this also makes Rasengan Uzuhiko genuinely one of the most dangerous jutsus in existence, because if, hypothetically, Boruto were to use that amount of power on anything or anybody, it would evaporate everything around him. And when you start to understand how incredibly powerful this jutsu could be, it makes Boruto wielding it even more confusing. Listen, because I get it. Boruto is an unrivaled genius in the Naruto world. This is a kid who, by the time he was a Genin, had already mastered shadow clones, wind release, lightning release, and while trying to learn the Rasengan, accidentally added lightning release to it, so his Rasengan disappeared when he threw it, something he was also able to do without making it a Rasen Shuriken. A, the addition of lightning release to the Rasengan, something that both Minato and Kakashi couldn't do, and B, the throwing of a Rasengan without augmenting its shape, something that Naruto couldn't do. Even Sasuke openly admitted to Boruto that in the 1 year they spent together, Boruto learned everything Sasuke had to teach. He is undoubtedly the greatest genius we've ever seen in the Naruto universe, far surpassing the likes of Neji, Naruto, Sasuke, Shikamaru. If there's something out there that can be learned, he will learn it. But that doesn't answer the question of how he figured out to tap into the Earth's energy. Who taught him this? How did he figure it out? Was it because of his Jogan? Was it because of Kashin Koji or Orochimaru? And if it was because of Kashin Koji or Orochimaru, how did they figure it out? Why are we just now tapping into the rotational centripetal force of the Earth? If this jutsu is truly as all-encompassingly powerful as it seems to be, then why are we just now dabbling with this idea? See, an anime logic here would tell you that the Earth, being a globe spinning on an axis, is just like a Rasengan. And thus, since the globe is just one spinning Rasengan, Boruto figured out how to tap into the Rasengan spinning-like power of the globe and conceptualize it as Rasengan Uzuhiko. And thus, really, the only thing you need to do in order to figure out Rasengan Uzuhiko is understand the rotational forces of the Earth and how they apply to a Rasengan-like shape. And I can almost guarantee you that that's the explanation that we're going to be given by Kishimoto. That in essence, the Earth is just the biggest Rasengan out there, and that Boruto learned to tap into the rotational power of that Rasengan, siphoning it slowly but surely for himself. But as to whether or not he was able to figure that out on his own, or with the help of Momoshiki, or his Jogan, or Kashin Koji, or Orochimaru, we really can't say. Nothing in this manga, part 1 of Boruto, Naruto, or Naruto Shippuden has pointed towards the Earth's rotational power being a source of power for anybody in the story, and thus genuinely for me to sit here and say, oh, I think Kashin Koji was the one who helped him with this would be disingenuous. But if I had to put my money on it, I'd reckon that it was either Kashin Koji or Orochimaru. And I believe those two separate people are possibilities for different reasons. See, Orochimaru is unfortunately kind of a catch-all explanation for any and everything mysterious in the Naruto universe. Oh god, we're bringing people back to life? Well, I guess it's because Orochimaru dug up an antiquated technique created by Tobirama. Oh, Orochimaru's able to keep themselves alive through the medium of the curse mark? Well, I guess that's because they figured out how to seal their chakra and DNA into their curse marks, and therefore every person walking around with a curse mark is kind of just like a respawn point for Orochimaru. Oh, Orochimaru perfectly figured out cloning and figured out a way to make Mitsuki into a perfect Snake's Age? Well, they are in a state-sponsored laboratory nowadays with infinite resources. I guess they could accomplish something like that. Orochimaru's singular goal on Earth being to figure out all knowledge, whether it be jutsu, ninjutsu, taijutsu, genjutsu, or just scientific knowledge like cloning, means that basically any phenomenon can be tied to Orochimaru at any given point. And thus Orochimaru, in their quest for infinite knowledge, could have stumbled upon the idea that, oh, the globe's spinning. I wonder if we can use that power. And bing bang boom, unfortunately, that would be an adequate explanation considering how Kishimoto has explained things away in the past. However, the reason that I believe that it could have possibly been Kashin Koji who taught Boruto how to tap into the Earth's energy is that Kashin Koji should be privy to the majority of Amado's scientific research, including the creation and augmentation of all of the cyborgs. See, Kashin Koji is a clone of Jiraiya. Yes, but Kashin Koji is also probably the oldest out of all of the cyborgs and clones that Amado made, and therefore is probably the first iteration. And therefore, if anybody outside of Amado knows where Shibai's body might be located, it's probably Kashin Koji. And therefore, if there's anybody out there who could possibly harness the energy of Shibai outside of Amado, it would probably be Kashin Koji. Because everybody else who would be privy to that information, like Jigen, Ishiki, and possibly Ada and Daemon, are either locked in Konoha or dead. And thus that brings us to my explanation of how Boruto may have gotten Rasengan Uzuhiko, and brings us to the conclusion of how the manga is most likely gonna explain it, which is that the Earth is the biggest Rasengan and that Boruto is tapping into the energy of this massive Rasengan. But my possible explanation of how Boruto is able to use the Rasengan Uzuhiko ties into Shibai. See, because I believe the Rasengan Uzuhiko draws a rather direct line between Boruto and Shibai. And while there's already been a couple of lines drawn between Boruto and Shibai, like the fact that that Boroshiki doesn't manifest Momoshiki's horns, but instead Shibai's, I believe that there's one of two possibilities that explain how Boruto is not only getting Rasengan Uzuhiko, but how that could possibly be drawn into Shibai's connection with the Earth. See, the first possibility is what we've already talked about, that somewhere during the time skip, Kashin Koji took Boruto to Shibai's body, and either in the same capacity as Amado, giving omnipotence to Ada and reflect to Daemon, Kashin Koji, somewhat scientifically, possibly with the help of Orochimaru, was able to augment Boruto's either karma marking or just straight up body with either the chakra or DNA of Shibai. Now, if we were to go down the pipeline of this possibility, not only would it explain why Rasengan Uzuhiko, especially when used against Hidari, looked so similar to the jutsu that Shibai seemed to be cloaked in the one time we've ever seen him. As the one time we've ever seen Shibai, he was floating with a torrent of power swirling around him, but also this would explain why Boruto is currently unable to use his karma marking. See, because everything we knew about Boruto and his karma marking prior to the time skip seemed to point in the fact that Boruto over the course of the time skip would master his karma marking. I mean, he had all but mastered his karma marking before the time skip, so why does he have no control of it now when he's infinitely more powerful than he was 3 years ago? And while I've been playing with theories like the idea that Orochimaru is trying to reverse engineer the curse mark or just free Boruto from it and therefore it's currently unstable, another solid possibility is that finally Shibai is getting connected to Boruto in some way or another. And Boruto, after possibly absorbing the power of Shibai using his karma marking, because remember, karma markings can absorb all ninjutsu and power, Boruto now has an internal battle being fought inside of him between Momoshiki and Shibai. And if he lets his karma marking fully manifest, there's a solid possibility that one of them is able to take over. And thus Boruto is trying to avoid the usage of the karma marking in any capacity whatsoever, as he may not be powerful enough to keep Shibai at bay. But there is also another Shibai-based explanation to explain Boruto's new Rasengan Uzuhiko. See, because, well, obviously, the way that Boruto explains the usage of Rasengan Uzuhiko says that he's tapping into the power of the earth and the centripetal force. However, that's us assuming that Boruto actually knows how this jutsu works. See, because here's the thing. Basically, the only thing that's been concretely confirmed is that Boruto needs both his feet on the ground in order to channel the power of the earth to use the Rasengan Uzuhiko at varying levels of strength. Outside of that, as to whether or not he is actually using the earth's power or its kinetic energy spinning force is kind of up in the air, because after all, we don't know how or why Boruto is able to learn Rasengan Uzuhiko, so we have no confirmation. And rather interestingly, in chapter 12, outside of the exposition we got about Rasengan Uzuhiko, we also saw Hidari pop back into the Shinju hideout and be healed by what appears to be a divine tree, which was rather interesting because so far as we know, there shouldn't be any surviving divine trees out and about on Earth. And while there is obviously the possibility that this divine tree exists in a separate dimension, at the core of this divine tree, under all of the roots, is a giant black box. While the untrained Naruto theorist might think, oh, this is just one of Ishiki/Jigen's black boxes that he dropped on Naruto and Sasuke, it's different. The black boxes that Jigen and Ishiki used had 3 squares on the side, while the black box that we see in the Shinju hideout only has 1. And thus, a couple of videos ago, I played with the idea that this box is actually the final resting place of Shibai, because, as we all know, Shibai ate enough chakra fruits that eventually he was able to transcend his physical form. But in order for Shibai to transcend his physical form, he would have to eat a certain amount of chakra fruits, which means at a certain point after the consumption of a certain amount of chakra fruits, he would ascend beyond his physical form, which means that his ascension almost definitely happened after the consumption of a chakra fruit. And thus it would make sense that Shibai's physical body would be left close to a divine tree. But since we know that Shibai's body, even now that his soul isn't in it, still contains a massive amount of power on account of the fact that Ada was able to get omnipotence and Daemon was able to get reflect just from his body, it would stand to reason, considering how divine trees work, that the divine tree that he plucked the chakra fruit while they usually die wouldn't die because a massive source of energy would have been placed right next to it. See, because while we've seen divine trees that have had their chakra fruits plucked, like on Momoshiki's planet, die, they die for the same reason that all trees die: lack of nutrients. However, immediately after the entire globe's nutrients were sapped and put into this chakra fruit that allowed for Shibai to ascend, in kind of a moment of recycling, a lot of those nutrients were probably immediately given back to the globe in the form of Shibai's corpse. And this theory makes more sense when you consider the fact that Kaguya's initial story of why her and Ishiki came to Earth is because they were chasing after a divine tree. And based off everything that we learned from Hagoromo and Kaguya's backstory, a divine tree existed on Earth prior to Kaguya getting there. A divine tree that already had a chakra fruit on it, and thus there's a solid possibility that that divine tree grew around Shibai's body, producing a chakra fruit that was so powerful that Kaguya jumped Ishiki for it, and when she consumed it, she immediately awoke as one of the strongest Otsutsukis in existence. And that chakra was passed down to all of humanity on account of Hagoromo and Hamura and all of the children they have, which is why humanity is powerful enough to challenge Otsutskis, the only race of people in the entire universe with that capability. And it's because all of their energy comes from Shibai. But Nick, what does this have to do with the Rasengan Uzuhiko? Well, my theory dictates that Boruto isn't actually tapping into the rotational power of the globe, because while that power is absolutely insane, it isn't limitless. In fact, it has a very quantifiable hard limit. It's very strong, it's the strongest thing we've seen in the Naruto universe by a Texas mile, but it is not limitless. There is only one entity in the entirety of the Naruto and Boruto universe that is limitlessly powerful, and that's Shibai. Because as we all know, while technically omnipotence is used by several high-ranking Otsutsuki, at least that's the way it's talked about by Momoshiki, Shibai is the only Otsutsuki that we know of that was able to use omnipotence. And since omnipotence does literally allow you to do whatever you want, and it is the word for all-powerful, it's not a lie when I tell you that the only all-powerful person confirmed to be all-powerful in the Naruto and Boruto universes is Shibai. And Shibai has been shown in the one time we've seen the entirety of his body to be using a jutsu eerily similar to Rasengan Uzuhiko. And thus, what if in actuality, when Boruto says he's tapping into the power of the globe, he's actually tapping into Shibai's power? Because if Shibai's power is truly what reinvigorated the globe after he consumed all of the power of the globe through the medium of a chakra fruit, then tapping into the power of the world and tapping into Shibai's power are one and the same. And thus, the real reason that Rasengan Uzuhiko's potential is set at limitless is because Boruto is channeling the power of the only limitless creature in existence. But since Shibai's power exists all across the globe, kind of like Father in FMAB and Amestria, or it's a Mestress, that power is considered not only the power of the globe, but also has a rotational ability tied to it because it's spinning and it's everywhere. And this could possibly explain the existence of nature energy, or at least possibly explain why nature energy seems to be the only thing that works against Kekemora, jutsu that combined all 7 chakra releases and are usually specific to the Otsutsuki, because in some capacity, every sage that's tapping into nature energy is, in essence, tapping into Shibai's energy, at least a little bit. But if you think that theory's crackpot, then boy oh boy are you not gonna like our fan-suggested theory, because that concludes my possible explanation for how Rasengan Uzuhiko is so incredibly powerful. But let's now get into a theory that was emailed to me today, which reckons that Rasengan Uzuhiko is not in fact tied into the world being a giant spinning Rasengan or Shibai, but instead Rasengan Uzuhiko is tied back into Minato. So I got an email today that asked me the question, what if Rasengan Uzuhiko was taught to Boruto by Minato? And while at first I'll admit that the email seemed like complete and total nonsense when I was reading the title, the further I read, the more I realized that there was some validity in what was being stated here. So let's get into it. Theory is basically predicated on the fact that Boruto came back from the time skip with innate knowledge of how powerful his grandfather was with the usage of Flying Raijin, and also that Boruto came back from the time skip with Flying Raijin. And thus this theory is based off a theory we've been talking about for a while now, that Boruto could have possibly learned Flying Raijin from an Edo Tensei version of Minato, as that seems to be one of the only very few possible explanations for A, how Boruto learned Flying Raijin, and B, how he knew how good Minato was. However, Minato's knowledge doesn't pertain to Rasengan Uzuhiko, unless of course you watched The Last Tower. See, The Last Tower is my favorite out of the non-canon Naruto Shippuden movies, outside of maybe Blood Prison. And that's because, as somebody without a father, I'm a sucker for a father-son dynamic, and Minato and Naruto are together in this movie. Now, the end of this movie ends basically the same way as every non-canon Naruto movie ends, with a big old specific one-time use Rasengan. And in The Lost Tower, the big old specific one-time use Rasengan is the Super Rasengan, which is, in essence, created by Minato and given to Naruto. Now, this Super Rasengan is essentially the combination of Minato and Naruto's Rasengan, but not in the way of, like, the Uzumaki family Rasengan. No, this Rasengan is 2 Rasengans clashed into each other that eventually creates a torrent of Rasengan around Naruto that looks eerily similar to Rasengan Uzuhiko. See, because while technically this Rasengan does function more like a traditional Rasengan than Rasengan Uzuhiko, and actually probably looks closer to a Fang over Fang than Rasengan Uzuhiko, there is no doubt in me when I say that when Minato and Naruto combine their Rasengan, Naruto is cloaked in a full-body Rasengan, akin to how Boruto is when he activates Rasengan Uzuhiko. And thus the fan email stated that because Minato was able to teach Naruto the Super Rasengan in a non-canon movie about time traveling and dimensional rifts, that Minato's innate knowledge of rotational energies would allow for Minato to teach Boruto how to tap into the rotational energy of the globe. And when you consider the fact that everything in Minato's life is Rasengan based, whether it be the creation of the Rasengan or the 8 trigram seal that he lives inside of Kushina, or the fact that he married an Uzumaki who come from the village of whirlpools, basically everything in Minato's life is swirly. And so if there was going to be a person who would teach Boruto how to tap into the swirly energy of the earth, it could be Minato. However, that of course ignores a lot of information, like the fact that the Super Rasengan has no mention of whether or not their feet need to be on the ground. It happens instantaneously, and there is not one singular mention of using the Earth's energy. Tie that into the fact that yes, this happened in a non-canon movie about dimensional traveling and time shifts, and the idea that Minato was Boruto's teacher of the Rasengan Uzuhiko unfortunately falls closer to the categorization of fanfic than a theory, but still fun. And we like to have fun on this page. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. Out of the 3 possible answers that you've heard listed as to how Rasengan Uzuhiko could work for Boruto, which do you find the most likely, and which is your favorite? Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I have to take a Dayquil? I don't know. I feel weird.